Federico, welcome to the channel. Welcome to Cancer Metabolic, not Genetic.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, no problem. So I do have a few questions I've written down here. So for the audience members, please can you introduce yourself and tell us what you do?
Yeah, of course. My name is Federico. I am part of the team at the Seyfried Lab in Boston College, working under Dr. Thomas Seyfried,
Right,
where
yep.
we examine cancer as a metabolic disease. And my specific role in the lab is to look at kind of the ethical implications behind a lot of what we're doing, and what it means for the field, the cancer field as a whole. Um, I also manage some of the social media for Dr. Seyfried, and I graduated from Boston College with a biology degree in 2023. And that's where I kind of met him and started working with him. And then I'm doing my master's in bioethics 20 minutes away at Harvard Med School, so still in Boston.
Right. So what exactly is bioethics?
So it's kind of the realm of looking at advances in biotechnology and biology, and placing a kind of an ethical bounds to what's moral and what's not in terms of advancements. We see a lot of these new genetic editing technologies, and in vitro editing and all these things. And so it's important to look at those things ethically, whether it's ethical or not, to implement them in society. In regards to cancer, which is what I'm interested in, is really the ethics of cancer treatment and cancer care around the world, the ethics of administering poisonous chemotherapies to people, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I mean the ethics. Well, according to Professor Seyfried, on some of the videos that I've edited, it's immoral, especially for glioblastoma patients, because the treatment itself ends up killing the patient faster than the cancer would. I mean,
Yeah,
how ethical is that?
yeah, yeah. That's a big thing that we look at in the lab with glioblastoma, which is a brain tumor, as you know. Very aggressive brain tumor. The standard of care, which has been in place since 2005, hasn't really done much for the patients. It only adds a couple months of survivability, while drastically lowering quality of life. So, as you said, the treatment itself, we've shown, and it's been shown that the radiotherapy increases the amount of available glucose and glutamine in the brain microenvironment, which is directly driving tumor growth and recurrence. So, obviously, that it's a very big question ethically whether it's okay to administer something like that to a patient.
Yeah, well, in my opinion, obviously, it's not ethical at all, and the whole system being broken really it does disturb me a great deal. Actually, if you watch that video that I put out last week, it's just a snippet of one of the professor's interviews, and in fact, it wasn't an interview; it was a presentation he gave, and he put on the image of Danny Sheehan on the screen. Danny Sheehan, it just really upset me, and you can see how passionate I am about this whole thing. If you watch that video, it just, I'm getting upset now thinking it, just to see that kid's face as an 8 year old,
Yeah.
and then you've seen the photographs, I'm sure.
Yes.
Yeah, and then to see him as a 9 year old with moon face, and just before he died, and it was the chemo and radiation that did for him, wasn't it? So metabolic therapy. When's the paper coming out?
There is as you probably heard from Dr. Seyfried, a protocol for
Yep.
glioblastoma coming out pretty soon. It's under review right now, so
How
the
long do
period.
these things take?
It takes a few months, and it's never an exact time because sometimes the reviewers want you to go back and edit some things. Other times, not as much. So usually it should take a few months, but it's already been in the review process for about a month already. So
Right.
hopefully very soon. So
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I'm
and,
really,
and
I'm
as you
really
said,
looking forward to seeing that. Yeah.
yeah, and as Dr. Seifert said in your video, the GBM protocol, of course, it's for glioblastoma, but it can be tweaked in a few minor ways to apply to other cancers because the general baseline is relatively the same. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. Another question I really wanted to ask was 6-diazo 5-oxo-L-noreleucine. Do you know of a reputable supplier in China?
Well, the thing about Dawn is that while it's not available to the public, and I'm speaking in the United States here,
Yep.
it's interesting because you can do research with it and you can even order it, but you have to be an LLC or some sort of a company. You can't be an individual with no credentials or no,
Yep.
research plan or whatever you want to call it. So there's a way to get done like that, but again, for the average patient, that's not possible. Of course, they want to get the drug. As someone who manages the social media, one of the biggest requests I get is where can I get Dawn? I'm willing to get it from China or from India. And, I haven't been able to speak on the efficacy of that because I don't know enough about it, about where to get it from China or India. I'm sure there's websites that can kind of post it or advertise it, but I don't know if that actually works or if it's some sort of a scam or something like that. But
Yeah,
yeah,
that's the difficulty, really. I obviously running my channel, I've had that question on many occasions, and I have a forum on my website. The website is metcancer.com, and on the website there are many of Professor Seyfried's papers on there for people to download. Dennis Stacey is an so-called N of one who works with the Hippocrates Research Foundation, and he's now no evidence of disease, having had arterial sarcoma, which was he was basically sent home to die. But I get that question a lot on the forum, and so I've got a section on there specifically for Don,
yeah,
and I found a Chinese website that is like an AliExpress version that sells chemicals, and
yeah,
a search for the exact search term 6-diazo-5-oxo-L-noreleucine came up with quite a number of suppliers, and we just the issue that we have is that obviously you can't go to Dana-Farber or MD Anderson or anywhere else to get metabolic therapy, and so people are left to their own devices, and they have got a very steep learning curve from being sent home to die to trying to avoid it by doing
yeah.
metabolic therapy. And so it's really, really tough for people. And as I say, I had a discussion with Jason on my channel only last week, who is stage 4 esophageal cancer, who was given, I think it was 9 months to live, and 18 months later he's still here, and he's doing metabolic therapy. But one thing that we did say was that it's quite easy to start a company. A limited company here in the UK on the government website costs £12. And I know it's not expensive because I've actually done it myself. I was the managing director of a lighting business, selling LED lights. So, yeah,
Yeah.
I just had to ask the question. That's all, because obviously
Oh,
people are. That's must be one of the biggest questions that you get asked.
Definitely, and I think the a big thing to note about Don is that has been tested on humans, and as Seyfried has said, uh, tested on humans for cancer, and as Seyfried has said, it worked in some cases, not in others, and there was an element of toxicity, but all of these trials weren't pulsing the Don or pairing it with the diet, so it's not.
They were actually giving it with sugar. I mean,
Yeah. So it's very difficult to gauge the real potential of Don when you're not using it correctly. So
yep,
that's one of the problems, and also the second problem is, as Seafried has mentioned, the revenue problem because the drug is off patent. It's difficult to make money off of it.
yep.
Which definitely adds to it as well. So
Oh, absolutely. So if you get a job in a hospital as a bioethicist, how's that going to go?
well, I'm not particularly trying to go into that route, probably because of a lot of the difficulties with that job. But if I were to get that job, I would probably be very, especially in the oncology ward, I'd probably be limited to what I can actually do for these patients because, as you know, the hospitals are legally required to offer only the standard of care. And it's even a problem. I think a lot of the oncologists we work with, and I've actually emailed with one in California who's very big on metabolic therapy, and he, of course, tells his patients about it. But he can't legally bring that up as the first line of defense, so to say. So he has to offer the patient the standard of care, and then he can say, you can pair this with a ketogenic diet, fasting. It'll make it more standard of care more efficable. There are some legal boundaries as to not only what oncologists can do, but clinical bioethicists who might be aware of these problems in the cancer ward is probably not going to do much, just because of all the roadblocks and things blocking you legally from making a change, which is difficult.
When I went into the hospital with my own personal cancer, I took a paper of the professors. I'm trying to think which one it was now, but cancer as a metabolic disease or something like that. Anyway, and the oncologist just took the paper and dropped it in the bin and said, "I can only do standard of care." That was it. That was end of conversation.
Yeah.
And it's like I say, the whole system's broken, and it just. I've said it will be a disruption. That behind me is a disruption curve, and just like the iPhone disrupted Nokia, just like Blockbuster was disrupted by Netflix, by just like horse and cart was disrupted by automobiles, I think that metabolic therapy will be disrupted from the ground up. I think people will do the press pulse, but when your paper comes out, people will go to a retired doctor that knew what he was doing to his patients was wrong, and that will then start treating patients with metabolic therapy, and I think we'll see a lot of people getting well. First things the hospitals will know when people stop going, because that's the only way I see it happening, because it certainly won't happen from the top, because the drug companies rule the roost, don't they? I mean, even in the UK, and we have a national health system. The health system in the UK is free at point of delivery. It's all paid for by the taxes. So you go into a hospital for an MRI scan, and it's free. You go everything's free. You do pay for prescriptions, which is about £9. Which, how much does chemotherapy drugs cost?
Oh, in the U.S., it's like $3,000+ that you pay out of pocket. So
Wow.
yeah.
So and is that even if it's covered on your medical
Yeah,
insurance?
because many chemotherapies, they're only partially covered, or sometimes not even fully covered. Some of the crazy stuff, because I do look into the finances. That's part of what I do as well. And there's actually a paper that describes the financial toxicity of cancer, because, and even a very interesting Wall Street Journal article came out a couple weeks ago, front page, about how cancer destroyed a family's finances. I mean, and it was terrible because the mother, it was a single mother, working mother, who got cancer, and she could no longer do her job. She got fired. She's paying thousands of dollars for these treatments, and all of a sudden she's completely out of money. She gets evicted from her house. Has to figure out where to move her kids. And that story is not isolated. That's happening all over the country in the U.S. And to point that out, these new therapies that are coming out, immunotherapies, many of them are not covered by insurance because they're so new. And some immunotherapies are upwards of $100,000 that you have to pay for,
Wow.
US dollars. And the reason for that is because they're patient specific. So, they basically take out your immune cells, then they re-engineer them, put them back into your body to, target a cancer cell epitope.
Right.
Everything based on the somatic mutation theory, of course. So these therapies not only are extremely expensive, they're also toxic, many of these immunotherapies, because some of the immunotherapies, like chemotherapy, can't differentiate between a healthy cell and a cancer cell. Um, and so it's a big problem, the finances and just where the field is trending, because everyone is talking about immunotherapies as which is difficult.
Right. Yeah. No, absolutely. You just broke up a little bit there, but I'm sure it'll be all right. Just $100,000. It's just absolutely mind blowing. I mean that's somebody's house gone right there, isn't it? And if you're not rich, if you've not got rich family, I mean, where do you go? I can. I would imagine that there are a lot of people that get diagnosed with cancer commit suicide. I mean, is that the case?
Well, yeah, I haven't looked into that, but in many cases, one of my mother's coworkers got glioblastoma, and they quit their job, uh, and because they view it in a way as a death sentence, especially for a cancer as difficult as glioblastoma.
Right.
And so they were probably given 6-8 months to live by their oncologist, and they figured, why would I work? I'm gonna maybe travel or see something, or live my last months of life happily, or things like that. And many patients, we've actually seen this in GBM care. Many patients prefer uh, to avoid all these aggressive interventions, especially if their prognosis is so low.
Yeah.
Because why would you want to live the last 2-3 months of your life in the bed, weakened? So that's another big point.
Yeah. That Dennis Stacy, he was given two options: die in 8 months with no chemo or radiation, in 18 months with chemo and radiation, but with a dire standard of living, and that was the two options that he was given. And obviously he's done metabolic therapy, and he's now no evidence of disease, which is absolutely brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah.
So on a day-to-day basis, so you're obviously at Boston College right now. So Seyfried has a class that he lectures. I heard that you said that you were in that class. So tell us what the class is, and what's it all about.
Oh yeah.
Cancer is a metabolic disease.
Yeah. So he teaches this class, which is um, It's a very small class. It's called Cancer as a Metabolic Disease, as you said. And it's targeted towards seniors because it's an advanced elective. So, as biology majors, we have a requirement to do an advanced biology course
Right.
to graduate. And so, there's several options. And one of the options was cancer as a metabolic disease, which I gravitated to because in my previous course, the previous year, I took a genetics course where naturally there was a module on cancer, and cancer was outlined as a genetic disease, all the oncogenes, and these sorts of things at the same university, right? And the professors, at least the professor says at the end of her presentation, she said, "There's a guy upstairs that would disagree with everything I just said. He teaches a course on it. If you're interested, you can take it." So I appreciated her mentioning that because I haven't even heard of Thomas Seyfried at the time. So that's what gravitated me towards the course. And about the course itself, it's definitely the most influential course I've taken because he plans it out very well. It's in a conference room. There's only about 10 or 12 students, and it's a very intimate learning environment because the first few classes are presentations where he presents both theories. He presents the inconsistencies in the somatic mutation theory, and then the entire class is basically a model of he's trying to get us to find something that disproves the mitochondrial metabolic theory, and he encourages us to dive into the literature. Our main assignment is to find a research paper in the field and analyze it sentence by sentence
Right.
and see whether it's a paper that's written with the assumptions of the somatic mutation theory or the
Right.
mitochondrial metabolic theory. And he really drills us when we present because we have to present this paper. Excuse me. And he really drills us with questions, and you really notice. I really noticed when he was doing this about how well versed he is in the literature. I genuinely don't think I've ever seen someone, a researcher or a scientist, that is so involved in reading the literature how it's meant to be read. Because I've noticed with my colleagues and others that a lot of people nowadays, when they cite a paper, they're only reading the abstract or they're just glancing, over the paper. And it's so important to read every single line. And if you don't understand, because often the case when I read a paper, I don't understand a term or, some sort of pathway or whatever. And you have to look at
Tell
it
me
and
about
say,
it.
okay, yeah, you have to look at that and say, all right, what paper are they citing? Now let me look at that paper and read that paper, see what that pathway is, or look it up. Once you really read a paper in depth like that, like Seyfried taught us to, you can 100% see all the assumptions they're making that are wrong, all the inconsistencies in their statements. You wouldn't believe papers in the field that are published and peer reviewed say that cancer cells can use oxidative phosphorylation to get energy, which is incredibly not true because the hallmark of the cancer cell is that oxidative phosphorylation is deficient. That's why
Yep.
it's fermenting. But so many of these papers view the energy metabolism of the cancer cell as something that can switch back and forth between using oxygen and fermenting, which is a big misconception. So it's really prevalent.
Yeah. I mean, when oncologists say to patients, eat what you want, it doesn't matter. Sugar has nothing to do with cancer. Excuse me, how does your PET scan work? I mean, they give a glucose with a radioactive marker on it, and the glucose is sucked up by the cancer cells, and the radioactive marker shows up on the PET scan. I mean, how can they possibly say that? You know, I mean that Professor Seyfried says it's a lack of knowledge, but Really? Really?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's definitely a huge problem. And what they also say, I mean, they paint these cancer cells as very complex, and in a way they are, but it's a lot more simple than people think it is, because they, also these papers describe cancer cells as having the ability to rewire their metabolism into all sorts of different mechanisms. They say that they can use fatty acids for energy, which is not true. In fact, we can see fat stored as lipid drops on the cancer cells, and they're not using them because you need a good mitochondria to burn fat.
Yeah.
So there's a very good paper that Seyfried describes this. I don't know if you've seen. It's actually one of his came out recently. It's one of his favorite papers. It describes the role of lipid drops in cancers
Right.
because lipid drops are seen across all major cancers, accumulating on these cancer cells. And the field thinks that this is some sort of energy reserve that they can kick in and use. But the whole reason these lipid drops are condensing into the cancer cells because they can't use them. And it's actually a marker of the deficient oxidative phosphorylation that they're even there. And
Right.
he's done research experiments where he puts cancer cells in a dish, and if you and healthy cells, and if you remove the oxygen or if you damage the mitochondria, these lipid drops appear out of nowhere onto the cell. So it instantly shows that if there is a deficiency in oxidative phosphorylation, these lipid drops appear onto the cell as a way to show that we can't use these for energy because we need a healthy mitochondria.
Yep.
So
Yep.
it's really clear once you really make these research. Once you really put this research out in the field, you would expect it to be clear, but people either don't look at it, ignore it. It's insane.
Yeah. I was going to ask about the in vitro is like you say in the petri dish, and it was in vitro that the team was able to discover the fact that they ferment the other fuel, and that being glutamine.
Yeah.
I truly believe that will win the professor the Nobel Prize. And I said that to him on our podcast, and he said, and I said, let's just hope it's not posthumously. And he said they don't give it posthumously, and besides that, then they don't give it for what I'm doing basically. But he certainly deserves one, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at this stuff, like Otto Warburg was nominated twice for this stuff on cancer. He didn't win the Nobel for his cancer stuff. He won it for another thing, but
Yep.
um, Seyfried expanded on Warburg's original hypothesis by
Yep.
showing glutamine is the other fermentable fuel. So I think that's a huge advance. Um, so yeah, that would be obviously great to see him get recognition for that.
Yeah.
But I think what we're most worried about or focused on is actually getting this information out to the field and having them fully read it and understand it, because it's interesting because these papers are getting cited. It's not like, and they have a lot of views because you can also see that when you publish.
Right.
So the people are viewing this and citing it. Now we don't know where many of these views are coming from. Maybe from the layperson, even more so than the oncologist. But that's a big thing with us, is to get people to read the research papers, and that's why we're also transitioning to social media more, because we realize that research papers are not as accessible to people as videos and stuff.
Now I've seen the Fembendazole. Sorry, no, online. I've seen the Mebendazole paper, and that's on the website for people to download. But I've also, when I asked the professor, "Have you done Fenbendazole, because obviously Joe Tippin's famous Fenbendazole protocol has made it all over the internet. Do you have any plans to do Fenbendazole in the mice?
Um, we haven't really spoken about that. All of the members in the team are currently doing a project right now, so I can say that the projects we're working on, one of the students is working on showing that cancer cells can't use lactate for energy, because that's another big misconception in the field,
Right,
that cancer cells can use lactic acid in the microenvironment to fuel themselves, fuel
right,
growth.
right,
Which is, again, we know that's not true. Cancer cells excrete lactic acid, of course, as the
yep,
byproduct of
yep,
fermentation.
yeah,
Um, so there's the paper coming out with that. Of course, we have our MD in the lab who just finished up the protocol paper with Dr. Seyfried. And then our PhD student, he actually is, I think this paper might be published already. The big paper showing the role of glutamine in as an energy fuel for cancer, and also describing a very important phenomenon which Warburg messed up on, which is using oxygen consumption as a marker for ATP synthesis, right?
right.
Because a big thing that has driven the misconception in the cancer field is that they see cancer cells taking up oxygen and they automatically assume they're using it for energy through
Oxfos,
oxphos.
yeah, yeah,
But this paper that Derek's doing is showing that the oxygen intake, which is lower, is being used for production of ROS, right? The reactive oxygen species that the cell, the mitochondria, emits
right.
um, as under stress. So, and we've been able to show this with, or Derek's been able to show this with bioluminescent ATP. You basically make the ATP bioluminescent by altering it with a labeling, right?
All right,
And
wow.
and then you show the oxygen intake, and you measure whether ATP production is lower or higher with oxygen
Brilliant.
present, oxygen present. And so we've been able to make that connection that the oxygen intake in cancer cells, which has confused Otto Warburg and it's confused the field, it's not linked to energy production, which is a
Yeah, yeah,
huge marker. So
yeah.
that paper,
It, you, you think it's game set and match at that point, don't you? And it's like the nuclear transfer experiments. When you look at the nuclear transfer experiments, I mean, I'm going to do a video in the summer holidays when when the kids are off school. I've got a friend who's got a 6-year-old and a 7-year-old, and we're going to do the nuclear transfer experiments. And I'm going to video it, and it's going to be a video on my channel. And basically, what we are going to do is get a bowl, so that bowl represents the cell, and then I'll get something like an egg or a golf ball or something that will represent the nucleus, and then we'll get some marbles or some ball bearings or whatever to represent the mitochondria. And so we'll do the nuclear transfer experiments, and we'll see that a 6-year-old and a 7-year-old can see that the damage is in the mitochondria and not in the nucleus, that's causing the cell to be poorly.
yeah,
And if a 6-year-old can understand it, then that's game set and match. But of course, it's not, because the hospitals are ruled by the drug companies. Any doctors are taught drug by the taught drug medicine. So it won't be game set and match. It'll still be game on, unfortunately.
yeah. Well, the big problem is, and I would recommend this book to you and any of the viewers. I don't know if you've seen
Travis
it before.
Travis
Yes.
Christopherson. Yes, I've got it.
Uh, yeah, it gives the kind of historical analysis of how cancer was viewed over time. It's a very easy read, not as dense as some scientific books like Dr. Seyfried's book.
Like that one.
Um, yes, yes. I see a lot of people complain that it's a little more dense or difficult to read, but this book is very easy and it conveys a lot of the same stuff. But one of the quotes that really sticks with me from this book is a quote from Michael Bishop, who is one of the people that drove the somatic mutation theory. He won a Nobel Prize for showing the role of viruses in causing cancer with the DNA mutagenesis. And he said it has become axiomatic that the seeds of cancer lie in genes. And the following quote is from Albert Einstein, who says, "The important thing is not to stop questioning." So you have the Michael Bishop, the guy that's driving the somatic mutation theory, saying that it's axiomatic to not question that cancer is genetic. And that goes against everything that science is supposed to be. You're supposed to be questioning these theories over and over and over again
Yep.
through time.
Yep.
And even Einstein's theory of relativity, which is so strong, it's one of the strongest theories we have. It's still subject to questioning, always, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And it should be the same way with the somatic mutation theory. Yet, for whatever reason, people have taken this view of Michael Bishop, and it's just so dogmatic in their brains that cancer is genetic. Of course, money plays a role as well. But, people just haven't been able to think differently about the disease because they're so convinced that it's genetic, which is,
Yep.
the root of the problem.
Yeah. Cancer Research UK is the largest charity here in Britain, and they have people wearing pink, running around parks, and we just need more money. We just need more money, and we will beat cancer. We will beat cancer. And of course, everything's based on the somatic mutation theory of cancer. And all of the research they're doing is based on the somatic mutation theory of cancer. And it's wrong. And the really annoying thing is that they post on X, and I follow Cancer Research UK on X, and they will give some award to someone who's done some groundbreaking research or whatever. And I say, why don't you try reading the science? And then I will post a link to one of the professor's papers, and I get crickets. That's all I get, crickets. I don't get any debate. I don't get anything. One oncologist who's in the States somewhere, I followed him for a while. In fact, I think I'm still following him. But I said, why don't you try looking at cancer as a metabolic disease instead? It's not genetic. And then a load of his patients gave me a hell of a load of abuse, saying that, of course, it's genetic. What was the I'm trying to think of the breast BRCA1. The BRCA1 has stepped into the room, someone said, and it's but I tried to get them to argue with the science, and all I got was abuse. I didn't get any arguments with someone proposing a paper to me, or someone showing me the evidence that it's a genetic disease. It was just personal abuse, because that's all they had. They didn't have anything. But you mentioned Albert Einstein, and one of Albert Einstein's sayings was, it's the definition of insanity to do the same thing over and over again and expect different results. The oncologists with the glioblastoma patients, they're doing the same thing over and over again and expect different results. I mean, what must it be like? I asked this question of the professor, and his reply was they think they're doing so, they think they're helping the patients. But I asked, what must it be like to see someone and know that they are a dead man walking or a dead woman walking when you've just literally diagnosed them with stage 4 glioblastoma.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing is, everyone knows, including the oncologists, that glioblastoma care is failing. If you look at the literature for glioblastoma, I haven't found a paper that doesn't state in the introduction that the survivability for glioblastoma has stayed around the 12 to 20-month range for decades. And so every single paper, no matter what theory they're working with, every single paper mentions that glioblastoma care is one of the most disappointing things in cancer care right now.
Yep.
And of course, that has led to so many clinical trials for innovative treatments for glioblastoma. And where the real problem is, yes, the standard of care is a problem, but the big problem is that over 25 clinical trials for glioblastoma in the past 20 years have failed miserably. All of these clinical trials, all of them, involve some sort of new chemotherapy, more densely dosing chemotherapy, another immunotherapy. Um, they're throwing everything at this disease. They're injecting poliovirus into the GBM tumor. They're injecting genetically engineered HSV into the tumor. Things that really don't make sense from a scientific aspect. But they're throwing everything, and I think I'm actually writing a paper on this phenomenon myself. That's what my kind of project in the lab is. Um, the lack of continuity and the vastly different approaches being proposed to treat GBM are very indicative of the lack of understanding of the nature and progression of the disease.
Yep.
One of the treatments, one of the only treatments, actually the only addition to the standard of care that was approved by the FDA, and one of the only quote successful clinical trials for glioblastoma. I say it in quotes because it only added about 4 months or 6 months of survivability. Was using something called tumor treating fields, which is a brain cap that you put on to your head. You have to shave your head, and you put it on your head, and it delivers electric pulses through the brain.
Sounds like
Um,
something off the Green Mile.
yeah, I mean, I mean, think about it. How did they even come up with this stuff? And they, you know, they approved that. They say the mechanism of it working is, the electric pulses uh, dysregulate DNA replication through some sort of mechanisms. But it's really insane to think about how they're coming up with these treatment approaches that are so vastly different from the next, right? From you go from clinical trial to clinical trial. One of them is injecting a virus. Another one is using a electrical brain device. The next one is proposing another immunotherapy. And all of these things, for the most part, aren't working. Um, Even the brain caps, there's actually a lot of trouble in that study that people are bringing up with placebo effects and all that. It is interesting to read. But this brain cap, is something that you have to wear for 18 hours a day. So it
Wow.
drastically lowers the quality of life of the patient. It's not entirely painful, but it did leave half of the patients in that study with localized skin toxic effects, so their head was full of rashes and irritation. Um, and so, not only is this treatment providing the most marginal of benefits in terms of survivability, but imagine the life of a patient where you have to have a this massive cap on your head for
Yep.
18 hours a day. You're probably not going to leave the house with that because, think about the confidence or the appearance of someone. You're probably not going to be feeling like yourself walking out with that type of stuff on your head.
Yep.
So, you're keeping this patient in their house all day. Quality of life, of course, goes down. Marginal, very marginal benefits, if any. Um, so that's the huge problem we're targeting with glioblastoma, and that's why the lab is so focused on it. Is because this is where we can see the discrepancies and really the ethical, you know, really problems with cancer care the most. It's just exacerbated with glioblastoma. Um, so yeah, that's why we're so focused on that and just showing people like, look at what we're doing to these patients, right? It's
Yeah,
insane.
yeah. No, absolutely. And just just take away the two fuels. Um, uh, I mean, it's so glaringly simple that a 5-year-old would understand it, and yet, they're still doing it, and it's so heartbreaking and upsetting, and I I don't know any glioblastoma patients personally. There is someone who has he's a member of the forum. No, sorry, he's commented on some of my YouTube videos, and I've tried to reach out to him to get him on a video podcast like this. Because if I had to do a GoFundMe to get him some done myself and go to China and put it down my put it down my underpants, then you know I'm joking, but you see the passion of how frustrating it is for me, and for you guys it must be even worse, especially when you see all of the you must get thousands of emails a day, and the professor must get well, tons, mustn't, does he?
Yeah, of course. And, I'm in his office regularly, and sometimes we read over these emails, or he reads these emails to me. And one of the emails that, and of course, this is a daily thing, as you said, hundreds of emails a day.
Yep.
Um, and he read to me one that is stuck in my mind. I want to contact this person to speak with them. It was about a woman whose husband died. Um, not from so the husband had a thyroid cancer, I believe stage 2. It hadn't metastasized. um,
Right.
the, prog- the prognosis was not bad. They didn't give him uh, date, or you have 24 months to live, none of that, right? But of course they want to treat his cancer. So he was put on the Opdivo Keytruda combo um,
Right.
for his cancer, which is very common combination for treatments nowadays for all sorts of cancers. And so what he ended up having was a bad reaction to the treatment, with a lot of swelling in his colon. Um, and so they gave him a ton of steroids to try to get the swelling down in the colon, but it wouldn't work. And his colon kept on swelling from the treatment. And it ended up perforating. So he ended up with a perforated colon, and he got an infection in there. Um, and because his immune system is already compromised because of the nature of the treatment, that's what these treatments are. They're immunosuppressive. An
Right.
infection which may have been, he may have been able to deal with, a healthy person may have been able to deal with, took him over the edge and killed him. Um,
Wow.
well, there's this person with a prognosis that was not bad at all, and he had a thyroid cancer, yet he died from a colon infection. And so that's indicative of, what's going on with this treatment, right? You have a cancer and you don't die from the cancer, you die from something completely unrelated to it because of the treatment that you were given. And so this lady, of course, was devastated by this because it happened out of nowhere. She wasn't expecting death. You know, the husband got the infection and then died soon after. Um, it just completely devastates the family. And of course, she's very passionate and driven to share his story to the world,
Right.
which is very important. That's why I'm bringing this up, is because that's not an isolated incident. The medical term for this is when someone dies of the complications of cancer. What they're really saying is they died from the treatment itself.
Yeah. Yep.
And, there's some interesting statistics about the percentage of cancer patients that actually die from the treatment itself rather than the cancer.
Oh,
And,
absolutely. Yeah. 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 I know of people myself. One question for you. Can you please share my email address, vincent@metcancer.com, with anyone that you get that wants a voice, because I'm happy to speak to anyone on the channel, whether it's that lady. I really would like to speak to people that have done metabolic therapy and are now well, and specifically the ones that are no evidence of disease, because they're the lights, shall we say, in the darkened corridor.
exactly. Yeah, I will do that. Mhm.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. And yeah, as we've discussed, one of the things I wanted to bring up in this discussion was kind of the reactions that people get from either what we're doing or the videos, like a video like this, or what I post on Dr. Seyfried's social media. Of course, we get a wide range of reactions. Many of them are positive testimonials of people saying that I've been doing this with my cancer and it's been working greatly. Um, but a few of the reactions, as you mentioned earlier, are borderline abusive and, of course, not attacking anything in regards to the science. But
Yeah.
um, something I wanted to address or just kind of discuss is that a lot of people, it's just so ingrained in their minds that, and this book that I mentioned talks about it. So it's so ingrained in their minds that cancer is something to be battled with ferocity, and you need to battle it with everything, and you need to get radiated and poisoned, and that's the only way to deal with cancer, and it's going to be a very, very difficult battle, and you have to win it, right?
Yeah.
um and that's just ingrained across society. I mean, I know tons of people in my life that have gotten cancer, some of them which have survived, right?
Yep.
Because
Yep.
there are people.
I'm one of them. I'm a survivor of standard of care.
Exactly, yeah. And so that's another thing that contributes to the difficulty of this, is that many people get chemotherapy and radiation and beat their cancer, so to say, and survive. But you know that's indicative. Like, the reason that happens, and a good metaphor for this is, if you have a problem, of course, if you, I hate to bring this as a metaphor, but let's say there's some sort of a terrorist in a building, and let's say that's the cancer, and you want to target that.
Yep.
You could use a carpet bomb and blow up the entire block and kill him, while, of course, damaging all the civilians and all the innocent people. And yes, maybe you will recover from that, right?
Yeah, we got him.
Yep. And of course, that can happen, and the patient can survive, and they had a terrible time. No one enjoys chemotherapy, no one enjoys radiation, but they end up beating their cancer that way. And I think it's called for terrorist or cancer. without having to destroy everything in the vicinity, right? Because that's really how these standard of cares work, is they target practically everything and hope to get your cancer, which is such a medieval approach if you think about it. So that's a huge problem I wanted to address, but also I kind of got off track there. What I was trying to convey was, in regards to the negative reactions we get, people think that it's just too simple to be true. Um, Many people have the misconception that Seyfried is saying that a ketogenic diet will cure cancer,
No,
and
he's
he's
not.
never said he's never
No,
said that, nor will he ever say that. But
no.
people just automatically assume when they hear metabolic health and cancer, they think he's just proposing a diet to cure the disease, which is not true. Um, they rarely stick around to the video to actually see he's never saying that. And even then, even if they do stick around to view the full video, they just think it's too simple. And, how can this be true when cancer is so complex? There's so many mutations. It's so, all the genetic anomalies, all the different pathways. How could it be so simple? But that's the beauty of what we're doing, is that if you really, really think about it, nothing that is alive in this planet can live without their energy source. And it's
Yep.
the same exact thing for cancer cells. You cannot, no matter what gene mutations you have, if you don't have an energy source, you can't grow and you can't live. So it should be simple that we're targeting their fuels. And if you eliminate all of them, they'll die.
Yep, absolutely, and that's what the professor said on many videos. It sounds too simple. It sounds too simple. Yes, it really is that simple. It's not complicated, right? That's what he says. It's not complicated, and when he talks about the theory, the geocentric theory of the Earth being Catholic Church believing that the Earth was at the centre of the solar system, and Giordano Bruno burned at the stake for believing that the sun was at the centre of the solar system. And it took 200 years for that for the Catholic Church to admit that the sun was at the centre of the solar system. And when the sun is at the centre of the solar system, and of course the planets go round like so if the sun is at the centre of the solar system. And in fact, I'll put it on this video. I'll put it as B-roll on this video. And you look at the when the Earth is the model with the Earth at the centre of the solar system, and it is extremely complicated.
Exactly.
And cancer is exactly the same way. It's extremely complicated when you view it as a genetic disease. When you view it as a mitochondrial metabolic disease, it's simple. And there's a saying, keep it simple, stupid.
Exactly. Yep. And we draw that parallel so often because the behaviors that people that are driving the somatic mutation theory take on are very similar to the people that were constantly arguing for the geocentric theory, because there was a time where the observations and the mathematical formulations just weren't making sense with that model. So people had to add epicycles and add all these crazy orbitals for it to make any sense.
Yeah.
And we see the same thing going on right now with the somatic mutation theory. When you present them with questions like, why doesn't everyone with the BRCA1 mutation end up getting cancer? How do you explain the nuclear transfer experiments? How do you explain, some cancer cells not having mutations? And
Yeah, that's game set and match as far as I'm concerned. How can some cancers not have any gene mutations?
and it continues, and how I forgot the other question that we usually bring up, but the point is we ask these questions and all of their answers are non-scientific. So in regards to the nuclear transfer experiment, they say, well, has it been repeated? Who is doing these studies? It's never about the actual science. And, that's just such an easy cop-out answer.
Yep.
And of course, even in the field, they're claiming some of these genetic mechanisms that we don't understand in regards to cancer. They either say there's a knowledge gap, they bring up crazy things like dark matter as responsible for making these things. Um, they create this thing. They have this word for it called epigenetics, which is the environmental, you know, how the environment shapes the genes and stuff, which is interesting. There's some good things coming out of that field, but they use a lot of quote excuses or epicycles to get patterns that we're driving at them, um, which is not how science works at all, right? The whole point of the theory is that you shouldn't be making additions just to satisfy a question or an epicycle. The theory should be laid out, and no matter what you throw at it, it should be able to defend itself from the contents in the theory. You shouldn't be pulling in from all sorts of dark matter sources and all these things to answer the question, knowledge gap. Um, I mean, you just have to imagine, like, if someone were to question the gravitational theory, um, you would be able to answer all of their questions by drawing from that theory and drawing from the mathematical formulations of that theory. They're not having to pull anything from the external other theories or other fields or anything. Everything you need is in that theory. And once you see that the somatic mutation theory is not capable of answering uh, or explaining observations that have been repeated over and over in science,
Yep.
then you see there's a fundamental problem with the theory. You can't be adding on to it. So that's the big problem. I think that's the biggest indicative factor. It's
Have
not
you
right.
have you actually spoken to proponents of the somatic mutation theory
Oh,
yourself?
all the time. Because every professor I've had that's not Dr. Seyfried believes cancer is a genetic disease, right? So as a biology student, I've taken all sorts of genetics courses, cancer biology courses, and everyone teaches it uh, as a genetic disease, right? The cancer modules are all about oncogenes, tumor suppressor genes, um, you know, passenger mutations, driver mutations. Uh, you know, the only mention of mitochondrial metabolic stuff is the Warburg effect, and that's actually taught in every cancer class because it is recognized. No one doubts the Warburg effect to be a real thing, but they don't view it as the central aspect of cancer that's driving the cancer. They just view it as, oh, also the cancer can rewire its metabolism to ferment surrounding nutrients or metabolites. They don't view it as something that's actually the purpose and the origin of the cancer is the deficiency in oxphos and the damage to the mitochondria.
Can
So
can they show any one gene that that is responsible for any one cancer?
no, there's no 100% penetrant gene. Um, and people, their response to that is that well, it's about the pairs and mutation, and if you have this mutation and this mutation, you get it. And of course they cite the knowledge gap, and they don't know. They're like, how can we expect to know? We have so many genes in these and mutations in these cancer cells, thousands and thousands and thousands of mutations. We're
Yep.
to
Yep.
expect that certain combinations are responsible for it. So that's their response to it. And it can somewhat pass for a logical response because we do know that genes are so important in regards to many things in life. It encodes for all the proteins that we use, etc. There's no doubt that genes play an important role in our body, but in regards to cancer, and that was the main kind of point where the somatic mutation theory won out over uh, Warburg's theory, is when Watson and Crick discovered that DNA is basically the code of life, and when the subsequent observations of researchers showing that cancer cells are loaded with mutations, people automatically assume that well, if DNA is the code of life and cancer is so mutated, it must be that is driving the cancer.
Yep. Yep.
It just made so much sense, and it made sense to me when I was, you know, going through these courses, right?
Yep.
It's not when you until you look at these research experiments and the literature that shows that um, you know the mutations are not 100% penetrant. You have the deficiency in oxphos that is driving the energy metabolism through fermentation of the two fuels, and that the chronic damage to the mitochondria that causes that switch from oxphos to fermentation is the origin of cancer, because all the mutations we see are then resulting downstream effects from the loss that's emitted
Yep.
by damaged mitochondria.
That was the light bulb moment for me when
Yeah,
the professor said to I'm trying to think of the guy now. He said Reagan Chatterjee on Reagan Chatterjee's channel. He is an oncologist from the UK, and he said that it's a downstream effect. The damage to the mitochondria, the damage to the nucleus and the DNA is a downstream effect of ROS, the random oxygen species, and that it's downstream. And Reagan's face was just an absolute picture when he as well as me realised the not only the implications to the disease, but the implications to the whole field. And when Professor Seyfried says that it's the greatest tragedy in medical history, I don't think that. I think this is the greatest tragedy in human history, not just in medical history, in human history, because it's the amount of 10 million people will die each year, will die this year, according to Cancer Research UK, of cancer worldwide. And I mean, I don't know how many were lost in all of the wars, but if we look at cancer over the last 50 years, I'm sure that we will have lost more people to cancer than we have in all the wars put together.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's probably true, and definitely. I mean, there's so many people dying from cancer a day, and uh, it's insane to think about. Even just the percentage of people, as we've discussed, that aren't dying from the cancer itself, but rather the treatment.
Yep.
That's another huge problem. Um, but yeah, as we said, I think the transition hopefully is kind of beginning to happen. Um, Seyfried mentions this a lot, but it's not going to happen that we're just going to replace the standard of care right away with metabolic therapy. It's probably going to have to start as an adjunct therapy, slowly work it into the standard of care. Eventually, once you see that improve, and it's interesting because there are papers out there for breast cancer for patients that underwent chemotherapy but paired diet, and it showed much better results. Now, people kind of equate that to the chemotherapy working better under a low glucose environment. Um, but no one actually has thought to say, okay, well, that's working well. How about we remove the chemotherapy as a control group and do the diet? Um, it would be even better if they pair it with the drug, but again, that's also another hurdle that we have to do. But I think the transition is slowly happening. It's going to happen in steps.
I
Um,
like I said, I think it will happen as a disruption, and I think people will hear about it, they'll learn about it. Just to let you know, I've literally on Friday I've sent a letter, a physical letter. Do you remember those? You won't remember those. You're far too young. But I've sent a physical letter to Joe Rogan to see if we can get the professor on the Joe Rogan podcast, because you know there's no huge podcasts that he's been on. It's all all right. You might have someone on YouTube with 250,000 subscribers, like Drew Porritt, for example. But he hasn't been on somebody with tens of millions of subscribers like Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson and Lex Friedman, for example.
Yeah, that would be huge. Yeah,
Yeah.
and we realize like this is so unconventional to be able to do this, but we realize that it doesn't matter how much research we put out into the literature, it's not being noticed. So we have to defer to videos and podcasts because the lay people are more receptive to this than the actual researchers, which is insane to think about. And you know, I didn't really answer your question earlier about conversations with people that believe in a somatic mutation theory or use that. Part of what I did in my project in the class was reach out to the oncologist who is responsible for the clinical trial that ended up becoming the standard of care for glioblastoma, Roger Stoop. Um, the protocol is named after him. It's called the Stoop protocol.
Right.
And so he responded to me. I was specifically asking him about uh, Pablo Kelly and his success without the standard of care. And he mentioned that this was an anomaly. He mentioned his IDH1 mutation, which of course is true. He was an IDH1 mutant, and that's a good prognostic factor. But even the field, this is a big problem too. The field doesn't recognize why IDH1 mutant glioblastoma is a better prognostic factor. Um, and it's because it acts as an inhibitor of the glutaminolysis pathway. So it makes it more difficult to use glutamine for energy, right? Somewhere in the pathway, it's inhibiting the mechanisms for that. And the field doesn't understand that. And we know that because at one point they tried to target that mutation with a drug that you know deletes that mutation or blocks that mutation. And what we saw, the results were disastrous. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
why would you block a mutation that is actually helping your cancer prognosis, right? And so they threw that drug off the shelf because there's no way to rationalize using it because they basically killed the patient, one of the patients, with that drug.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and so that's something we describe a lot with IDH1 mutant glioblastoma. It actually acts as a synergistic factor with the diet, and it's actually once you pair those two, that's why Pablo Kelly is doing so well. 10 years plus that he survived after diagnosis. You know, that's
Yep.
like 10 times the average survivability of GBM. So that's an important thing that we see. Like, once again, the field doesn't know, uh, you know, the relevance that some mutations might actually be better, but better, and they target them because they have the dogmatic view that all mutations are bad, all mutations cause cancer, etc. Um, but they finally realized IDH1 mutant is a good prognostic factor. But the overarching point is when I speak to these oncologists, as I said, Roger Stoop,
Yep.
um, they say it's an anomaly, or when I just don't present any cases and just ask them, what are your thoughts on the cancer as a metabolic disease? Um, and I give them the research for it. They say, well, who is behind these studies? Has it been repeated? All these questions which don't actually address the science. I would love to see just one response that says, well, it's actually this mutation or this pathway that causes cancer, and it's in regards to DNA replication. But I've never seen that. And I've reached out to so many oncologists, and many of them actually get quite angry at me, um, and say you should be getting your information from more reputable sources and whatever. Um, but then I say, Dr. Seyfried's in a top institution. He's got over 150 publications in top peer-reviewed journals, and other, not just him, have repeated these studies. And of course, if you really want to go back to the root, you go back to one of the best biochemists of all time with Otto Warburg, one
Yep.
of the Nobel laureates for his work. So it's not like any random people are doing these things. It's repeated by legitimate science, and when you pose it to these people, they don't look at it, they ignore it, they throw non-scientific replies back at you. And it's important to think why. Another part of my study in the class presentation that I did was looking at the average salary of a oncologist in the United States, both radiation oncologists and normal oncologists.
Right.
And you won't find a single oncologist in the United States that's making under $400,000 a year, right? The average is around 450 to 500,000. So when you're arguing this point to someone that makes a very, very comfortable living on what they're doing, of course they're going to be angry.
Yep.
Um, you just expect that answer, and it may not even be that they're bad people, but it may be that, like, okay, well, what are you proposing here? That everything I've done in my life, the 8 years of med school, has all been a sham.
I'm trying to find the quote, and I can't remember who it was who said it, but the gist of it was, it's hard to get a man to understand something when his paycheck paycheck requires him to not understand it.
That was Sinclair Lewis.
Sinclair Lewis.
Yes,
Ding, ding, ding.
Yeah, who said that. And that's the truth. Because I had somebody tell me one time that if we did this, we'd have to close half the hospitals in the country. And I said, why? He said, well, radiation revenue brings in the most revenue for all these other things that don't make as much money. And if we stop irradiating people, we're going to have to close the hospital. I said, what about the patients? The patient doesn't have any say in this.
Aha! Aha!
And we don't want to phrase it like that, because some of these people got into oncology with real genuine interest in helping people. Like one of the oncologists I spoke to, the whole reason he became one was because his father died from cancer when he was 14. So his whole life he's been working on trying to better people with cancer. But they just don't. They just haven't been able to see this in their med school, or they just haven't read the literature. And when you kind of put this in their face, it's a reaction that is kind of, like, holy crap, man, you're really telling me that everything I've done is hurtful rather than helpful. And
Yep.
it's a shock. So I don't attribute any, like, I don't have any sort of, I understand why they react that way. Again, who knows what these people think, these oncologists think, if they actually have read the literature and they see that it's actually true, that the science is there, and especially in regards to the brain, you should never be radiating.
I don't think that anyone. Well, I'm sure there are some people out there, but I don't think that there are many people out there who was an oncologist, who read the literature and understand what you and I understand, that would carry on doing what they're doing. I mean, all right, yes, $500,000 a year is one hell of a lot of money, but to continue doing that when you know different, that's not unethical. To me, that's murder.
Well, yeah, that's the immoral aspect, because we talk about morality and ethics is kind of a external rules that society places on you, the hospital places you. But immoral or morality comes from inside the body, right?
Yep.
You know what you're doing is wrong.
Yeah.
And that's what I really wonder when I'm thinking about this is, these oncologists are smart people. They've excelled in med school, many of them top of their class. They're by no means, dumb, right? They're
Yep.
very smart people.
Yep.
Were they led astray with a theory that is inconsistent in med school? Yes. But these people aren't dumb, and I think that's really interesting to think about whether if these oncologists did read the literature and have read the mitochondrial metabolic theory, um, what would their heart imply them to do for their following patients? Would they still irradiate them? Would they still give them chemotherapy? And how do they, we joke about this in the lab kind of to lighten the mood, but we always say, like, how do these neuro-oncologists specifically sleep at night, or how do they go on vacation with all this money, knowing that, they just radiated 4 dudes a week, and they radiated their brain, which we have shown that you should never radiate the brain because of the swelling and the massive increase of glucose available freed up from the radiation and drives the tumor growth. How do these oncologists live with that? Um, it's medieval to think about. It's
Yeah,
really
yeah, no,
crazy.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I suppose the next one for glioblastoma patients from the standard of care will be bleeding the patients.
Yeah, I mean it's insane, and I think this book, Travis's book, mentions this, and many people believe this, that in 100 years or so, hopefully less, we'll look back on chemotherapy and radiation the way that we look back at leeches in the medieval times to cleanse the people. Medieval practices, poison that didn't work and was really terrible to the patient. I think we're going to look back at it, chemotherapy that way in the
Yep.
future, because you realize you can do the carpet bomb approach and you'll have a few successes here and there, but the vast majority of people, well, all of them are suffering because of the treatment. There's no question about that. The vast majority of people are, put in a space that, yes, maybe they survive their cancer, but later down the line, 2, 3 years down the line, they have a recurrence because all the damage that these therapies do over time. Because we just know about the side effects when you're doing them, but of course these things they damage you, So
Yep.
it's very important to make that realization. Hopefully the field makes that realization soon.
Well, don't hold your breath. Professor Seyfried wrote his book in 2012, and I first saw a presentation of his in 2015, and nothing's changed so far, and I can't see it changing anytime soon. But like I say, I think it'll be a disruption, and if I can get a real good supplier of Don that will just supply anyone, whether it comes from China with a certificate of certificate of it being what I'm trying to think what Jason called it, a certificate of compliance or something. Anyway, a certificate that says that it's 97% pure at least, and people will get a hold of that new paper, take it to a doctor that they know and love, and will do metabolic therapy. They'll get well, and it will go around the internet like Joe Tipping's protocol did.
Yeah. Hopefully that's the case for sure.
Yeah, because that's the only way I can see it happening, because like you say, there's too much money involved. When somebody's earning that sort of money that you just mentioned there, they're not going to want to know anything other than what they're doing to carry on their gravy train of $500,000 a year.
The major thing that has been on my mind recently, as I as I do the social media stuff for Dr. Seyfried, is yes, there's an overwhelming response of positive testimonials. But those negative reactions, of course, I try not to let it get to me, right? Because of course, some of them are not even addressing anything; it's just abusive stuff.
Yep.
But some of the arguments that are relatively logical or valid, I do try to attend to those. Um, and again, I've corresponded with many oncologists that come across Dr. Seyfried's videos and then publicly either share it on their account or comment that, I'm an MD and an oncologist, and what this man is proposing is very dangerous. Please don't listen to him. This is misinformation, etc. Um, and I try to engage with these people and say, well, why do you feel that way, right? Did you read the literature? Are you making assumptions off this video? Because I try to convey every video that we're not trying to be some magicians and propose this magic cure with diet. Um, the whole point is to manage the disease more effectively to increase survivability. So
Yep.
give these patients more time on this planet. Um, as Pablo Kelly has done, give him time to live out his life. He's had a family now. He has kids. He wouldn't have been able to do that. That's the whole point.
Yep.
We don't know if his cancer is cured, if it can come back, whatever. But the whole point is not only to extend patients' lives with this stuff, but also to improve the quality of life. To not have them ridden in bed with, losing 50, 60 pounds or whatever, kilograms, and just vastly in a weakened stage, um, as you sometimes result with radiation and chemotherapy. That's the whole goal we're trying to do, is to improve the quality of life and extend their lives. There is no magic cure that we're proposing. It's just a more targeted, missile guided approach rather than carpet bombing the entire thing.
Yep.
And that's all based on scientific literature and the research. We're not pulling out of any magic dark matter, super diet, keto diet, spiritual diet. None of, because a lot of people attribute that stuff, like they hear Seafood speak and they think he's some sort of guru that is about all magic ground fruits therapy, whatever. That's not what we're discussing at all. It's full-on research experiment science that shows the evidence that cancer is a mitochondrial metabolic disease.
Yep.
It's not some sort of fad. We don't have anything to gain from this. We're not selling you a product or a one-on-one cancer coaching. Another thing I wanted to address actually was so many social media accounts out there are displaying massive amounts of misinformation in regards to cancer. One of them, which I specifically engaged with and told these people this is an outright lie, was this account called, I can't remember the username, but it's something along the lines of oncology.nutrition or oncology dietitian RD or something like that. And it's this lady who has a pretty big following, actually, over 250,000 people on Instagram. And her videos, millions of views. And she actually wrote a book, published a book. Mind you, this is the only credentials I could see for this lady is that she's a registered nurse. She doesn't have any sort of experience in cancer research. She's not an MD, an oncologist, nothing. She published this book that is titled "Sugar Does Not Feed Cancer," and the whole book is based on showing that sugar is not a fuel for cancer, which is just so wildly not true. It's insane. And
How does the PET scan work?
yeah, that's what everyone says. And I'm actually glad a lot of the people in the comments are bringing up the PET scan and says, "What do you say about that?" She never responds to those. But the big problem I have with that account specifically is that she is selling products. So she's selling a one-on-one cancer coaching experience where she coaches you on your diet for cancer. Now, not only is that illegal because you need to be an MD to give medical advice, but also that's extremely exploitative, and you're not only peddling misinformation, but you're also making money off it. And I actually dug deep into this lady. Her name is Nicole Andrews, and I looked into it, and she actually has a warning. She received a letter from the Federal Trade Commission, which is an agency, government agency in the United States, that chastised her for not disclosing in her videos that she's taking money from the food industry, because she has ties to, or she's taking money from the aspartame sugar alternative. And she failed to disclose that in a video where she was saying sugar is not bad for you, sugar is good for you. Aspartame is a good sugar alternative. And you have to disclose that it's a paid advertisement, and she didn't. So she actually got targeted by the Federal Trade Commission for not disclosing that. So you see, this person is not only peddling misinformation and making money off of it, but they're also taking money from the food industry to peddle this misinformation to a wide scale of people that are just accepting it without ever looking into the scientific literature.
Yep.
And that's a huge, huge problem, because people don't realize that whenever you get information from someone online, the first thing you have to do is look at their credentials, right? And you look up Thomas Seyfried, he shows up as a researcher with peer-reviewed publications. This lady doesn't show up with anything but, a Federal Trade Commission warning. So, but people don't look into that. People just see the videos, scroll, like it, and get misinformed, and it's contributing very much so to the scheme of.
I'll tell you now. We're going to the end of the video, and I can edit it out. My whole journey. I mean, I was diagnosed in 2014 with colorectal cancer, and I went down a rabbit hole of alternative treatments. The first book I bought was Mum's Not Having Chemo. And I read that, an Australian woman, and she mentioned a guy by the name of Vince, same as me, and it turned out that he lived in the next town over. So I contacted this guy, and I went round and saw him, and he filled my head with so much bullshit you wouldn't believe. Introduced me to Ty Bollinger and his so-called series, The Truth About Cancer, and his book, Cancer Step Outside the Box. And it's full of alternative cancer treatments, which are all bullshit. Apricot kernels cure cancer. What else? The Budwig Protocol, which was some sort of cottage cheese and something else or other. Gerson therapy, which is juicing and coffee enemas.
Very, very popular online. That juicing stuff, I see it all the time, it's crazy. Like these things come from these self-proclaimed nutrition gurus who, believe that everything is involved with, what you put into your body, which is somewhat true, but they just think that anything that is, natural and, fruits, vegetables, they don't talk about GKI. They don't mention anything that's actually relevant.
Great stuff. Great chat, Federico. Awesome. Thank you.
Have
See
a
you
good
later.
one.
Cheers, mate. Bye.